All right, hey, so in my previous video, I talked about articulating a vision and why that's something to think about, something useful, good, and important. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about what that's like. So, the thing that's coming to my mind actually is something quite, you might consider it somewhat trivial, which is that when I look back on like school when I was a kid, right, and the kids that I went to school with, I do think that one of the things that separated the kids that ended up doing well in school, ended up studying really hard and, going to university and going abroad, getting scholarships and stuff like that, versus those of us who kind of just screwed around and didn't really do anything. I think one of the core differences between us and between, slacker types like me and the more, um, I want to say prestige seeking, but just the more successful in the conventional sense, right? The difference between those who are successful in the conventional sense in school and those who are not, I feel, can really be boiled down to their vision of what it is all for. I have friends who um, just their parents are university educated. They have their parents like degrees on the wall, and there's even a space on the wall where their degree would be, right? And in the conversations that they would have with their friends and family, it's taken as a given that you're supposed to go to university, you're supposed to get a degree, you're supposed to do whatever else after that. And there is an amount of um, detail, right? There's an amount of detail in that vision for what the future is going to be like that me and some of my less ambitious friends. Well, now that I think about it, there were probably some who did have that sort of context and still did not do well. So it's necessary but not sufficient. But I think not having it is really a blow. Like if you don't know what you're putting in all that effort for, it seems kind of ridiculous. It seems like way too much effort for reward that you cannot perceive, right? You might know about it like in a vague intellectual sense, but unless you really have it in a felt sense, like unless you really feel that all these hours of work that you're putting in, day out, is going to translate into better outcomes for you down the line. And you know what those outcomes are. You've seen them. It's not. I don't know if it's enough to read about them. I think when I read about people in history who were successful at kind of memeing themselves into success in a sense, right? Which is to say they assemble a vision for themselves based on information that they consume, right? Autodidacts, is it didacts, autodidacts? People who just who who figure out a plan for themselves, right? I haven't actually watched Hamilton, but I'm thinking of the lines. There's some lines that's like, I'm gonna be great. I'm gonna shoot my shot. The world's gonna know my name, right? And like that kind of thing, that's vision. You have a sense of what you're gonna accomplish. You have a sense of how things are gonna be, and that vision, right, is almost, I've heard a metaphor or an idea. I think Jason Silva mentioned something like this. It's like this idea of an adjacent possible reality that does not currently exist, and so it's meant to exist in the future, but it's like overlaid onto your existing reality, right? And I mentioned in my previous video about how while I'm making these videos now that barely anybody is watching and whatever, I can keep going, and it's pretty easy for me to keep going because I have a vision for what this is a part of, right? Like when you like you so if you think about like a cathedral, right? You have a vision for building a cathedral. You have to know what the plans are. You have to know there's some minimum threshold of an idea of what it is that you're bringing into reality, right? There's quotes about how like the sculptor has to see the statue inside the marble. And if you don't see the statue in the marble, then what's the point of chipping at the marble, right? There is something to be said about like the trial and error process and kind of tinkering and figuring stuff out for its own sake, which is valuable and it is worth doing. But if you have no imagination, if you have no sense of what could be, then it's very difficult to, like, it's not so likely that you're gonna lay bricks randomly, a few bricks a day, and one day you're gonna have a cathedral, right? I mean, it can happen, but there has to be something compelling you. Like maybe if you're not gonna have a grand vision for what things are gonna be like, you still have to have some kind of persistence that keeps you going day to day, putting down each brick. Yeah, okay, let's talk about other kinds of visions on at larger scales, right? I was just reading a little bit about H.G. Wells, and he was, if you go to his Wikipedia page, it talks about how during his lifetime, he spent a lot of time and energy writing about, kind of futuristic sci-fi utopias and imagining what the world will be like. Ursula Le Guin has a great quote about how, we live in capitalism, in nation states and such, and it feels like all of these things are fixed and permanent and unavoidable. It's just the way things are. But back in the day, the divine right of kings and monarchies, right? Those things seemed like they were unavoidable and inescapable and just the way things are. And you have to be able to imagine what a different future would look like in order to be able to go there, right? It's very difficult to go to a future that you can't imagine, and especially when that future requires effort along a gradient that isn't like you don't end up at the top of a mountain through trial and error by accident. You don't go out for a walk one day and kind of I wonder where I'm gonna go. I kind of want to move around, and like it is worthwhile to go on random walks for the sake of going on random walks, because you'll discover things and see things that surprise you. But there are certain things that don't happen by chance alone, because the gradient, right? The gradient of difficulty is so high. You're not gonna accidentally bench press 200 kg, however 400 pounds or whatever, right? That, like, when a thing is sufficiently difficult and challenging, it requires concerted effort, and concerted effort requires that you know why you're doing it, because if you don't know why you're doing it, then it's just not rational to do the thing, right? Okay, so how do you come up with something to work towards, and I find myself thinking this is a domain of imagination. This is a domain of being playful, asking questions. Why isn't this like this? Why isn't it like that? What if we made it bigger? What if we made it smaller? What if we did it more? And yeah, I think very often people reason from like imitating their peers and maybe making small adjustments to that. And so even today, like before I made this video, I was on Twitter posting about H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw and Chesterton and all those people. I was digging into the Wikipedia pages, I was reading, I was sharing my reading. Like, nobody else is doing that on my timeline right now. And I'm not saying that people should do what I am doing, but I would like to see people do whatever they want to be doing. And I get the sense that a lot of people simply aren't thinking very much about what they want to see and what they want to do. It's like you wake up every day in the world and you react to it, right? You're like, what's in the news? What's on my timeline? What messages have I received? What's those things end up defining the boundaries of what you think is possible, of what you think is necessary, of what you think the market wants, of what you think should exist, stuff like that. And that's not healthy, I think. I'm a bit of an outlier on this, I guess, but I believe that it's very important to continually immerse yourself in I find myself thinking poetry, in fiction, right? And whether it's sci-fi or fantasy or whatever, just allow your imagination to explore, right? Einstein said something about knowledge will only get you from A to B, and in imagination will get you everywhere. And yeah, even like the periodic table or whatever, like everything that around us looks so concrete and final, right? Like it seems like it was done. We don't have a lot of day-to-day exposure to the creative process, to how things are created, and things are created very sketchily very often, right? It's a lot of drafts, a lot of crumpled paper, a lot of messing around. And so, there's I guess what I didn't expect this video to bring me to is that there's stuff about tinkering and messing around and being sketchy, and then there's stuff about having like this grand glorious vision. And yeah, you don't want to be some kind of ungrounded visionary who comes up with things that are just too far removed from reality. But even then, what is reality? And there's a McKenna quote that's something like, reality is just, culturally, socially sanctioned hallucinations, right? It's what is the value, what is the meaning of an object, any object, right? And what is the how are you supposed to dress, how are you supposed to conduct yourself, what are the aspirations that you can have? We all end up choosing from things that are kind of pre-selected in some way, right? And it's possible to go out further than what the default options are. And I'm just laughing at myself because I'm not sure if this is what I wanted to say in my vision part 2, but it's relevant. I'm gonna build this up. I'm gonna probably make like part 3, 4, 5. But like you just want to be open to the possibility that reality can surprise you, and that you can do things that nobody has done before. And not necessarily in like a grand sense, like, oh, I mean nobody has done before even in a local sense, right? Like, just for the people around you. You can come up with a new kind of music, you can come up with a new kind of writing style, right? You can come up with a new novelty, you can make new memes, like. And I know that these things kind of sound like, okay, well, like, sure, you're saying all these things, but what's the impact of that? Like, it sounds superficial and superfluous, right? Well, it's a start. Like, one of the things I've said before is that it's worth practicing trying new things in little ways. And examples are things like, try walking home a different route, try taking a different public transit back home from work. Try, when you go to the supermarket, try a new bit of candy that you haven't tried before. Try ordering a different dish than you normally order. Like, these are small things that, in day-to-day life, like, what's the point of doing that? Like, it's just you're going out of your comfort zone, and the comfort zone is always very comfortable, right? But that's why it's called comfort zone. You go out of your comfort zone and try something new and different, and sometimes you won't like what you tried, and sometimes you will like what you tried. And that's something anybody can do, right? And as you try new things, you start getting a sense of what you like, that is stuff that you've not tried before. I think that I've definitely encountered lots of people who feel frustrated and bored with life. Like, life is just boring to them. Like, every day I wake up and do the same thing and it's all boring. The immediate cure for that is to just do different things. But people are afraid to do different things. So you have to be honest with yourself about your fear of doing new and different things. And doing lots of new and different things, even lots of small little things, trying new food, talking to new people, posting something different than you usually post, right? Having conversations with people you haven't spoken to in a long time, talking to new people, right? All of these things, they allow you to leave your comfort zone. And in like the hero's journey story, that allows you to leave your town, right? And yeah, it helps to have some reason for doing this. And I guess my reason, I have a bunch of reasons. Maybe that's a separate video. But like, I'll try to keep this to like 15, 16 minutes. My thing is that, I want to see the world become a more interesting place, become a more fun place, more creative, more playful, right? I feel like we have the technology, we have the ability, we just mostly lack the imagination, the courage, the will, right? And the belief, like those things. And, in my reading the past couple of days, I'm thinking things like, Michel Montaigne, he figured out what's wrong with public education, public schooling, like 500 years ago. And apparently, like, scurvy, the disease, like, people figured out the cure hundreds of years before it was like widespread. So like, what that's weighing on me, because I'm realizing that it's entirely possible that a lot of the solutions to our problems are things that already exist, and we're just not paying attention to them or not taking them seriously. And so we should get on it, right? And yeah, at a small level, I guess my vision is to encourage people, is to, search my social graph and to go out into the world, find interesting people, connect them to each other, and have them try to impress each other and one up each other, and just introducing them to each other kind of reshapes their social intuition, right? Their intuition of what they can do. And when you see one of your friends doing cool things, that gives you indirect permission to do cool things yourself. And so, when you assemble a bunch of cool people doing cool things, if you look at history, that's how all good stuff has happened, right? Like, when was the number zero invented? When was algebra invented? Alchemy, right? And when scientific advancements, all these things happen in small scenes, like a dozen, 20 people maybe, who happen to share common interests. And it's never enough that there is, so money is usually a necessary part of the equation. People need to make a living and people need to be rewarded for their efforts financially, but it's never quite enough. You can't just throw money at a problem and have great things happen. Like, great things happen when great people want to impress each other. Like, when I read history, that's what I see, that's what I find out, and like that knowledge really weighs on me. It's like, oh shit, and I have to tell everyone. I have to tell everyone, did you realize that great things happen when great people try to impress each other? If yes, who are the greatest people you know, and can you introduce them to each other so that we can see more great things happen? That's a part of my vision. The video has gone longer than I would like. I'll get into more in the next video.